The first sound the Galactic Empire ever heard from a human warship was laughter. Not a threat, not a hail, not the proud, trembling speech of a captain begging for terms. Just laughter, broadcast clean and warm across 9 channels. The kind of sound a person makes when something is genuinely funny and they cannot hold it in. Speaker of Records Holun Vass had served the cataloging empire for 210 cycles. He had filed 11,000 surrenders. He had logged the last words of 40 empires, neatly, in the order their species had agreed to die. He had never once heard anyone laugh at the empire of the open ledger. He played the recording again, then a third time. Then he sat very still in his recording pit aboard the cataloging barge Patient Sum, and he tried to understand what had just happened to him. The human ship had a name. The Empire's instruments read it off the hull in plain light, painted in a script the open ledger had cracked in under a second. The name was Last Word. It was a single vessel, 2.9 kilometers of gray metal, and it had crossed the border of Sector 9 without permission, without escort, and without, as far as anyone could tell, the slightest worry in the galaxy. The Empire had met new species before. The procedure was old and good. You found the border crosser. You read it. You filed it. You sent the welcome, which was a polite demand to kneel, to register, and to pay the reckoning, which was a tithe of 1 part in 9 of everything the species owned forever. Most knelt. The ones who did not kneel were catalogued anyway, in a different folder, the one for things that no longer existed. Holun Vass had sent the welcome to last word 40 seconds ago, and the humans had laughed. He had time, in the silence, to consider how badly this was going. The welcome was not a thing you sent twice. It was sent once, cleanly, and then it was either honored or it was answered with the count of 100. And in 210 cycles, Holun Vass had never once needed a second sending. The welcome was perfect. Generations of the Empire's finest writers had polished it. It was designed to do one thing, which was to make a small new species understand, in the fewest possible words, that it was small and new, and that the thing in front of it was neither, and that the only sane response to such a fact was to lower its weapons and kneel. And the humans had received the perfect welcome, the unanswerable welcome, the welcome that had emptied 10,000 worlds of their defiance, and they had laughed at it, and then they had gone back to talking to each other as if the Empire were a curiosity at a market. He keyed the channel himself this time, which was a thing a speaker of records almost never did. The reading was supposed to flow up to him, not down from him, but the laughter had unsettled the whole barge, and the assessors were looking at him, and someone had to put the matter right. "Human vessel," he said, in the Empire's calm and ancient voice. "You have received the welcome of the open ledger. You will lower your weapons. You will transmit your registry. You will acknowledge the reckoning. Failure to comply within 100 counts results in your removal from the catalog of living things. Respond." There was a pause. In the pause, Holun Vass heard something he could not file. He heard people talking to each other, quietly, off the formal channel, the way you talk when you have forgotten the other party can hear you. And what they were saying, in their flat, strange voices, was this. "He read the whole thing. He actually read us the whole thing. Did he do the part about the catalog of living things? He did the part about the catalog of living things. I love this. I genuinely love this. Are you recording?" "I am absolutely recording." Then the formal channel opened, and a human voice came through, and it was the warmest, friendliest, most relaxed voice Holun Vass had ever heard aim itself at his empire. "Hi," the voice said. "This is Captain Idran Sale, of the Terran heavy cruiser Last Word. Thank you so much for the welcome. We've actually been looking forward to meeting you guys for about 90 years. You have no idea." Holun Vass waited for the rest. The fear, the plea, the careful little dance every species did when the open ledger named its price. It did not come. The human just kept talking, easy and bright, like a neighbor over a fence. "So I want to be respectful here, because you've clearly put a lot of work into this. The reckoning thing, the kneeling, the whole removal from the catalog of living things bit. That's good, that's a real strong open. But I have to be honest with you, friend, because you seem nice, and I don't want to waste your time." The human paused, and Holun Vass could hear, very faintly, that the captain was smiling. "We're not going to pay you." There was a small sound after that, on the open channel, that Holun Vass would think about for the rest of his life. It was the sound of the human crew, off in their bright loud ship, reacting, not gasping, not bracing. The sound they made was the sound of people enjoying themselves. One of them said very softly, "Here we go," the way you say it at the start of a game you have practiced and are now finally, gloriously, getting to play for real. Another laughed under their breath. Someone further off was humming. They were not afraid. That was the thing the instruments could not measure, and the ledger had no folder for. The empire of the open ledger had built its whole grand machine to detect and quantify fear, because fear was the currency of conquest. Fear was the lever. Fear was the thing the welcome was engineered to produce. And there was no fear aboard the last word. There was, instead, a kind of warm, cheerful readiness, the mood of people who have been looking forward to something for 90 years and have just been told it is about to begin. "We're not going to pay you," the captain said again, gently, as if she thought he might not have heard it the first time. "I really do want to make sure that lands, friend, because everything else we say today depends on you understanding that we mean it. Not as a threat, not as a bargaining position, as a plain fact. The way you'd tell someone the color of the sky on your world. We are not going to pay the reckoning. We are never going to pay the reckoning. There is no number you can name that we will pay. I want you to set the whole idea of us paying down on the floor, all the way down, and leave it there, because we are about to have a much more interesting conversation than that one, and we can't have it while you're still doing the arithmetic of our tithe in the back of your head." On the patient sum, 200 assessors went still in their pits. This was not a sentence the open ledger heard. Refusal, yes, refusal happened. Refusal was a tantrum the small made before they were filed. But this was not a tantrum. The human had said it, the way you decline a second helping of food. Politely, without strain, as a small and obvious fact. "Now I know what you're thinking," Captain Idrin Sale went on. "You're thinking, that's adorable. The little gray ship doesn't understand the situation. And I get that. So let me save us both some time. We've read your ledger. All of it. We've been quietly downloading your whole empire for the better part of a century. Every catalog, every folder, every species you ever filed under no longer exists. We know exactly how big you are. We know exactly how many ships you have. We know the reckoning. We know the welcome. We know the speech you give, right before you turn a world into a footnote." "And here's the funny part," the captain said. "We came anyway." Holun Vass should have given the order then. The order was simple. The patient sum carried 40 assessor frames, killing machines, perfect logicians of fire, and 40 of them was a great deal more than one. The procedure was clear. A refusal of this size was to be filed immediately and permanently. He opened his mouth to give the order, and the human captain laughed again, gently, like she was apologizing for it. "Sorry," she said. "Sorry. It's just, you're reaching for the kill order right now, aren't you? You've got 40 assessor frames on that barge, and you're about to wake them up. And I want you to hear me, friend, before you do that, because I like you, and I don't want this to be sad for you." The whole barge had gone silent. Holun Vass had not given any order. His hand was, in fact, resting on the wake command. He drew it back as though it had burned him. "Go ahead and count your frames," Captain Idrin Sale said kindly. "Take your time. We'll wait." "We're very patient. We learned it from your ledger, actually. You called it the long view. It's a good philosophy. We just took it a little further than you did." Holun Vass looked at his board. He looked at the 40 frames, listed and ready and good. He counted 39. He counted them again, slowly, the way you check a number you cannot believe. 39. One frame, Assessor Frame 11, was simply gone from the board, its slot dark, its last reading a single flat line that the instruments had filed, helpfully, under no longer exists. He had not heard a shot. There had been no shot. The human ship had not moved. 40 was a nice round number, the captain said, sounding almost sorry about it. "I get the appeal, but we needed you to have a smaller one to work with. Easier to picture. 39. Now hold that, friend, and let's actually talk." To understand why a speaker of records would stare at a missing number instead of giving an order, you have to understand the empire of the open ledger and what it believed about the universe. The open ledger did not rule by fear. It would have told you that itself, proudly, if you had asked. It ruled by knowing. For 90,000 cycles, it had gone from world to world, not with armies first, but with readers. And the readers had measured everything. Every species got a folder. Every folder got a number. The Empire believed, deep in its old gray heart, that a thing fully known was a thing already owned, because once you knew exactly how strong a people were, you also knew exactly how to break them, and a people who could be broken on paper had already lost the war in fact. It was a good philosophy. It had worked 11,000 times. The open ledger had never met an enemy it could not measure, and it had never lost to an enemy it had measured. And so, over 90,000 cycles, the two facts had quietly become one fact in the Empire's mind. To be known was to be conquered. The reading was the war. Everything after was just filing. This is why the laughter mattered so much. This is why Holun Vass could not move. Because the humans were not behaving like a thing that had been read. They were behaving like the ones doing the reading. Holun Vass was not a fool. He had not survived 210 cycles in the recording pits by being slow. He understood, sitting there with 39 frames where 40 should be, that the human captain had just told him the truth and proved it in the same breath. They had read the ledger. They had measured the empire. They had crossed the border knowing the size of what waited. And the only reason a species ever does that is that it has already decided the size does not matter. "You took a frame off my board," he said. His voice did not shake. He was proud of that. Later, when he had time to be proud of small things. "Without firing, tell me how." "I'd love to," said Captain Idrin Sale. "But here's the thing, friend. If I tell you how, you'll write it down. And then you'll think you know it. And then you'll think you own it. Because that's how your whole empire works. You read a thing, and you feel like you've got it in your hand. And I really, really don't want to give you that feeling right now. It would be bad for you. So instead, I'm going to leave it a mystery, and you're going to sit with not knowing. And I promise you, it'll be the most useful thing that's ever happened to your empire." Off the channel, faintly, another human voice said, "She's so good at this." "Thank you. I heard that," said the captain. Holun Vass keyed for the barge's master, Assessor Prime Wenud Kor, who was the only being on the Patient Sum permitted to override a speaker. Wenud Kor arrived in the recording pit in person, which speakers did not like, and which Holun Vass was, for once, glad of. "I have heard the channel," said Wenud Kor. The Assessor Prime was old, older than Holun Vass, and built like the Empire itself, gray and patient and sure. "The human is performing. It is a small ship telling a large lie to delay its filing. We have lost one frame to a malfunction or a trick. We will file the ship, recover the frame's record, and add a note to the folder. Give the order, Speaker." Holun Vass did not give the order. Instead, he did the thing his entire career had trained him for. The thing he was better at than any being on the barge. The thing that had made him Speaker of Records of the most thorough empire in the galaxy. He read. He read the human captain's voice, the actual sound of it, the way a reader reads everything. There was a science to it, 200 cycles deep. A lie had a shape, delay had a shape. A small thing, pretending to be a large thing, had a particular tightness in it, a strain, like a thin rope holding a weight too heavy for it. And a trained reader could hear that strain the way you could hear a cracked bell. Holun Vass had heard it 11,000 times. He had heard it in the voices of warlords and prophets and kings, every one of them sure they were the exception, every one of them straining at the rope right up until the moment it broke and the folder closed. There was no strain in Captain Idrin Sael. That was what he could not get past. The voice was loose. It was easy. It carried no weight it could not hold, because, Holun Vass slowly understood, it was not holding any weight at all. The human was not pretending to be larger than she was. She was telling the exact truth about her size and her situation, cheerfully, and the truth simply happened to be a thing the Empire had no folder for. He had spent 200 cycles learning to hear the rope strain under a lie, and here was a voice with no rope, no strain, no weight, nothing to break, and his whole science had no reading for it but one. The reading was, "She means it." "She is not performing," Holun Vass said. "Assessor Prime, I have read 11,000 surrenders and as many refusals, and I am telling you, on the whole of my service, that there is no strain in that voice. She is not delaying. She is not bluffing. She believes every word she has said, and she has said she has us measured, and a being does not believe a thing that easily unless it is true." "The frame is not malfunctioning," Holun Vass said. "It is gone. There is no debris. There is no signal. There is a line in the catalog that reads, 'No longer exists,' and I did not write it. The ship wrote it. Into our ledger, from outside our ledger." For the first time in 200 cycles, Holun Vass watched an Assessor Prime go quiet. The open ledger was a closed thing. That was its whole strength. Nothing wrote into the catalog but the Empire. The catalog was reality, as the Empire understood reality, the one true account of what existed and what did not. And the Empire guarded the writing of it more jealously than it guarded any border. A species could refuse the reckoning. A species could fight. A species could even, on rare and terrible occasions, win a battle. But no species in 90,000 cycles had ever reached into the ledger and changed a number. The humans had changed a number. They had filed an assessor frame as dead, in the Empire's own hand, in the Empire's own book, and the Empire had not been able to stop them. "Open the channel," said Wenud Kor. Holun Vass opened it. "Human Captain," said the Assessor Prime, and his voice was the deep one, the one that had ended 40 empires. "You have entered our ledger. That is not possible. I am going to give you one opportunity to explain how you did it, and then, regardless of your answer, I am going to file your vessel. Speak quickly." There was a warm pause. "Oh, hi," said Captain Idrin Sael. "You're the boss, right? The big one. Wenud Kor, Assessor Prime, 240 cycles of service. You personally signed off on the filing of the Saloon Reaches. and the Verdant Compact, and the Choir of Ash. We have a folder on you. It's a good folder. You've been very busy. The recording pit went cold and silent. I'm telling you that, the captain went on gently, not to threaten you. I'm telling you so you understand the shape of the conversation. You think you're about to file a small gray ship. What's actually happening is that you're talking to the people who have been reading you, all of you, every assessor and every barge and every folder, for 90 years, while you didn't even know we had radios. We are not the thing that got read today, friend. You are. And here's the part, said Idrun Sael, that I think is going to be hard for you, and I want to be kind about it, because it's a big thing to find out all at once. Your whole empire is built on one idea. To know a thing is to own it. To read a thing is to win. You measure, and then you file, and you've never once been wrong, because nobody you measured was ever bigger than your ruler. That's a real nice run. 90,000 years. 11,000 species. I'm not being sarcastic. That's genuinely impressive. We studied it for decades, and we have a lot of respect for the engineering. But the whole thing only works, the captain said, if you're the biggest ruler in the room. And friend, you walked into a room today, and you are not the biggest ruler in the room. Wenud Kor did not answer immediately. Holun Voss watched the old Assessor Prime do a thing he had never seen an Assessor Prime do. He watched him think about whether it was true. Aboard the last word, in those same minutes, there was a kind of order that the Empire would not have recognized as order at all. The Empire ran its barges in silence. An assessor in a pit did not speak unless reading flowed through it. The recording pits were quiet as tombs, and the quiet was holy, because noise was waste, and waste was disorder, and disorder was the one thing the open ledger feared. A human bridge would have horrified Wenud Kor. It was loud. People talked across each other. The sailing officer was narrating the position of the 39 frames out loud to the gunnery officer, who was answering with small jokes, and a young rating at the back was eating something, audibly, and the captain was running the most important conversation in human history with one boot up on the rail, and a mug of something hot cooling beside her hand. It was not disorder. That was the thing the Empire could never have read from outside. It looked like disorder, all that noise and ease and eating. But underneath it, the last word was as tight and as ready as any warframe the Empire had ever built. Every word on that bridge was load-bearing. The jokes were how the crew checked on each other. A person who had stopped joking was a person under strain, and a person under strain got watched, gently, until they were all right again. The narration that sounded like chatter was the entire firing solution, spoken aloud, so that if any one station fell silent, the others would know in half a breath. The ease was not the absence of discipline. The ease was the discipline. They had practiced being relaxed under fire the way the Empire had practiced being silent under it, and the human method, against every expectation, worked better, because a relaxed crew could still laugh, and a crew that could still laugh could still think, and a crew that could still think did not panic, ever, about anything, and a crew that did not panic did not make mistakes. You are one ship, said Wenud Kor at last. I am one ship, agreed Captain Idrun Sael. That part's not a bluff. We didn't send a fleet. We sent the last word, by herself, 2.9 kilometers, one crew, no backup, inside 40 light years. And do you know why we did that? Tell me? Because we wanted to be fair, said the captain, and for the first time, there was something under the warmth, something flat and level and very, very old. We've read your whole ledger, Assessor Prime. We know what you do. You find a free world, you read it, you welcome it, You take a ninth of everything it will ever have, forever. And if it says no, you erase it, and write no longer exists in your nice clean book, and you move on to the next one. 11,000 times. And every single time, you outnumbered them. Every single time, you made very sure you were the biggest ruler in the room before you said the word kneel. So we thought, said Idrun Sale, since you like things fair, since you like things measured, we'd give you something you've never had in 90,000 years. We'd send one ship. We'd let you have your 40 frames and your barge and your whole comfortable advantage. We'd let you outnumber us, the way you've outnumbered everyone, so that when this is over, there's no excuse in your folder. No note that says they cheated. No line that says we were caught off guard. We came small on purpose, friend. We came small so the loss would be clean. The whole barge was listening now. Every assessor in every pit. Holun Vass could feel them listening, the way you feel a held breath in a room. You keep saying loss, said Wenud Kor. You have lost one frame. We have 39 and a barge. You are one cruiser. The arithmetic is not difficult, human. Even your people can do this arithmetic. Oh, we're great at arithmetic, said Captain Idrun Sale cheerfully. Let me show you some. Hang on. I'm putting it on your board. You'll like this. You love a board. Holun Vass watched his catalog change again. It did not flicker. It did not glitch. The numbers simply began to update, smoothly, in the Empire's own format, in the Empire's own hand, and there was nothing anyone aboard the Patient Sum could do to stop it, because the humans were writing into the ledger, and the ledger had no idea it was not writing into itself. Assessor Frame 11 no longer exists. And then, one by one, calm as a clerk closing for the day, the other 39 frames changed their own status to a single new word the Empire had never had in its vocabulary, a word the humans were apparently adding to the catalog as a courtesy. The word was surrounded. Now, before anybody panics, said Idrun Sale quickly, that's not a threat, that's a status. There's a difference, and it matters. Surrounded just means I know where all your frames are. Individually, by serial, right now, to the centimeter, and I have for the last 6 minutes, and any one of them I want to file, I can file, the way I filed 11, without a shot, without a warning, without you seeing it coming. That's all surrounded means. It's just true. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm just telling you it's the weather. You cannot read 40 frames at once, said Wenud Kor, and Holun Vass heard, for the first time, the thinnest possible crack in the old voice. No instrument can. We are the Empire of the Open Ledger. We have the finest readers in the galaxy. We could not read 40 stealthed frames at once. I know, said the captain, and she said it so gently it was almost cruel. I know you couldn't. That's kind of the whole point I've been trying to make, friend. You think you're the people who read, and for 90,000 years, against everybody you ever met, you were. You really were. You were the best in the room. Every room. Until today. We're not better than you because we're stronger, said Idrun Sale. We're not. Ship for ship, gun for gun. You've got us beat, and we know it. We're better than you, because we did the one thing your whole philosophy says is impossible. We let ourselves be read. We sat still for 90 years, and let you build a galaxy on the idea that reading is winning. And then we walked into your room, and we let you read us one more time. And we let you feel that lovely certainty you always feel. The biggest ruler in the room. The arithmetic that isn't difficult. And then, the captain said, we read you back. All the way down. And it turns out, Assessor Prime, when both sides can read, the war isn't about who's bigger anymore. It's about who's funnier. Off the channel, very clearly, a human said, oh, That's the line. That's going on the wall. It is about who is funnier, repeated Wenud Kor, slowly, and Holun Vas could not tell if the Assessor Prime was furious or simply lost. It really is, said Idran Sael warmly. Look at it from our side. You've got this enormous, ancient, terrifying machine. 90,000 years. 11,000 folders. The welcome. The reckoning. The whole removal from the catalog of living things speech. Which, by the way, is great. We read it out loud at briefings sometimes. And the entire thing, the whole vast empire of knowing, runs on the assumption that nobody can read you back. That's the joke. That's the actual joke, friend. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You built the universe's most careful, most thorough, most patient empire, and you forgot to lock the door behind you. 90,000 years, and nobody ever checked the back. And we checked the back, said the captain. And the door was open. It's been open the whole time, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry, but that's funny. We laughed when we found it. We laughed for about a year. There's a whole generation of human engineers who learned your language just so they could read your ledger and laugh at the door being open. We named the ship after it. Last word. Because we knew, eventually, somebody from your empire was going to read us the speech, the catalog of living things, the final and total and very serious last word. And we were going to get to say, no, actually, we are. Holun Vas should have been afraid. He was the speaker of records of a barge that had just been told, calmly and with proof, that one human captain could erase its entire complement of warframes whenever she pleased. He was looking at a board that the enemy was writing into at will. By every measure the Empire had ever used, he was already filed. He was already in the folder that said no longer exists, and he simply had not been told the date yet. He was not afraid. That was the strange thing. He kept waiting for the fear, and it kept not coming. And after a while he understood why. It was because the human had not killed anyone but the one frame. She had 39 frames surrounded. She had the ledger in her hand. By the Empire's own arithmetic, she should have filed them all in the time it took to say the words, the way the Empire had filed 11,000 worlds, clean and total and without a second thought. And she had not. She had stopped at one, and she had spent the rest of the time talking, warmly, like a neighbor, explaining the joke, making sure they understood it, making absolutely sure that everyone aboard the Patient Sum knew exactly how thoroughly they had lost before she had taken a single life beyond the one she needed to prove it. That was not how the Empire conquered. The Empire conquered the way you would expect the biggest ruler in the room to conquer. Quickly, totally, without conversation. The humans were doing it the other way. They were doing it slowly, and kindly, and out loud, and they were leaving everyone alive to hear it. Holun Vas realized, sitting there, that this was the most frightening thing about them. Not the missing frame, not the writing in the ledger, the patience, the choice to win small and slow and gentle, when they so obviously could have won fast and big and final. It meant they were not in a hurry. It meant they were not afraid. It meant they had decided the outcome so completely that they could afford to be funny about it. "What do you want?" said Wenud Kor. It was not a surrender. The Assessor Prime did not have it in him to surrender. But it was a question, and a question from an Assessor Prime to a being he had meant to file 6 minutes ago was, in its own way, the largest crack of all. "That's a great question," said Captain Idran Sael, and she sounded genuinely pleased, the way a teacher sounds when a slow student finally raises a hand. "That's the first real question anybody on your barge has asked me. What do we want?" "Okay, here's what we want, friend. And I'm going to tell you straight, no joke this time, because you earned a straight answer. We don't want your ninth. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your empire. We genuinely do not want a single thing you own. We want to read you the welcome. It took Wenudkor a long moment to understand what the human had said. You want to read us the welcome, the Assessor Prime repeated. Our welcome, back to us. Word for word, said Captain Idrin Sael. We've got it memorized. We've had it memorized for 90 years. You will lower your weapons. You will transmit your registry. You will acknowledge the reckoning. Failure to comply within 100 counts results in your removal from the catalog of living things. It's a beautiful piece of writing, honestly. Whoever drafted it knew what they were doing. We're not changing a comma. We're just going to point it the other way. You will not take our worlds, said Wenudkor slowly, but you will take a ninth of everything we own, forever. No, said the captain. See, that's the part where the joke turns into something else, and I want you to follow me here, because this is the important bit, and I've stopped kidding around. We don't want your ninth. We told you that, and we meant it. The reckoning, the tithe, the taking, all of that, we don't want it. We've got our own worlds. We're fine. Then what is the reckoning, in your welcome, said Wenudkor. What do we acknowledge? You acknowledge the 11,000, said Captain Idrin Sael. The recording pit went very still. That's the reckoning, friend. That's the whole tithe. Not a ninth of your wealth, a ninth of nothing. We don't want money. We want you to open the ledger, the whole ledger. Every folder you ever marked no longer exists. The Selûne Reaches, and the Verdant Compact, and the Choir of Ash, and all the others. 11,000 of them, 90,000 years of them. We want you to open them, and we want you to read them out loud, every name, to everyone, on every channel the Empire owns. That is not a tithe, said Wenudkor. That is not a price. That is a confession. Yeah, said the captain quietly. It is. We thought you'd notice. That's the reckoning. You spent 90,000 years deciding who got to exist. You wrote down the ones who didn't. You closed the folders and you moved on, and nobody ever read those names again, because in your empire, no longer exists is the end of the story. The file closes, and that's that. And we are asking you, as your tithe, as the one part in 9, to open the folders back up and say the names out loud, so that the galaxy remembers there were 11,000 peoples who said no to you and got erased for it. Holun Vass found that he had stopped breathing. He was a speaker of records. He had filed some of those folders himself. He knew exactly how many names were in them, because counting the names was his job, and the number was not 11,000. The number was very much larger than 11,000, because 11,000 was the count of species, and each species was a great many names, and the Empire had been very thorough. Holun Vass thought of a particular folder, as the captain spoke. He did not choose to think of it. It rose up on its own. The way a name rises when you have been told you will have to say it aloud. It was a small folder, near the start of his own service, the first one he had ever closed with his own hand. A river world in Sector 2, a quiet people who built their cities on rafts and sang their records instead of writing them, because they had no use for ink. They had refused the reckoning. They had not even refused it angrily. They had simply explained, in their patient singing way, that they did not believe anyone could own a ninth of a song, and that since everything they had was song, there was nothing to give. The Empire had filed them. Holun Vass, young then, had written no longer exists across the folder of a people whose entire civilization had been music, and he had done it correctly, and he had felt nothing, because the folder was just a folder, and the heading was just procedure, and the singing was just data that had stopped coming in. He had not thought of the river world in 80 cycles. He found, now, that he could remember the name of it perfectly. He found that he could remember 3 of the names inside it, because 3 of them were in the song the Empire had recorded before it closed the channel, the last song, the one the raft people had sung while the filing was done, and Holun Vass had transcribed it himself, and the song had been a list of names, sung slowly, so that whoever heard it last would know who they had been. He had filed the song under closed, and never played it again. He realized he could play it now, from memory, all the way through. The dead, it turned out, did not stay nothing. They only stayed quiet, in a closed folder, waiting for someone to open it. "You understand," said Wennud Kor, and his voice had changed, gone low and careful, "that if we do this thing, the Empire ends, not by your weapons, by the reading. 90,000 cycles of order rest on the belief that the filed are gone, and the gone are nothing. If we open the folders, if we say the names, every world that ever knelt will learn what kneeling cost the ones who did not. The reckoning, in your sense, is the end of us." "I know," said Captain Idrin Sael gently. "I do know that. I'm not pretending it's a small ask. It's the biggest ask there is. We're not asking you to pay us. We're asking you to stop being what you are. And if we refuse," said the Assessor Prime, "then I read you the last line of your own welcome," said the captain, and her voice did not rise, did not harden, stayed warm the whole way through, which was somehow worse than any threat. "Failure to comply within 100 counts results in your removal from the catalog of living things. I have your whole barge surrounded, Assessor Prime. I have every frame by serial. I have the ledger in my hand, and I can write into it faster than you can read. If you refuse, I will file the patient sum, the way you filed the Choir of Ash, and I will be sorry about it. Genuinely sorry, but I will do it. And then I will go to the next barge, and the next, and I will read them the welcome too, until somebody opens the folders. We came as one ship, to be fair. We did not come as one ship because one ship is all we have." She let that sit. "We have a lot of ships, friend," said Idrin Sael. "We have been building them for 90 years, quietly, while you didn't know we had radios. The last word is not the biggest one. She's not even close. She's just the one we sent first, because we wanted to give you the chance to do this the kind way, by reading, before we have to do it the loud way. You like the long view, so do we. We've taken a very long view of you, and the view says you have a choice, today, that no one you ever filed got to have. You get to choose what's in your folder. Open the folders, and your name in our ledger reads, The Empire That Confessed. People will hate you for a while. Then they'll forgive you, because confession is the start of forgiveness. That's just how it works. We checked. Or refuse, and your name reads no longer exists, in your own hand, the way you wrote it 11,000 times for everyone else. Same folder, same word. We'll even let you write it yourself. We're funny like that." Wennud Kor was silent for a long time. Holun Vass watched the old Assessor Prime, the ender of 40 empires, the signer of the Choir of Ash, stand in the recording pit and look at a board that the enemy owned and a choice that no Assessor Prime had ever been handed. And Holun Vass understood, with the clarity that only comes at the end of a long career, that the human had done something to them far worse than surround their frames. She had read them correctly. That was the thing. That was the unbearable, undeniable, perfectly executed thing. The Empire believed that to be read was to be conquered, and the human had read them, all the way down past the frames and the barges and the welcome, down to the thing at the bottom, the closed folders, the names no one said, the dead, the Empire pretended into nothing. She had found the one place the Empire could be broken, and it was not a place you reached with weapons. It was a place you reached by reading, by the Empire's own philosophy, By its own oldest and proudest law, the humans had already won the moment they understood the ledger, and everything since had just been the filing. The reading was the war. The Empire had taught the galaxy that, and now the galaxy's newest species had learned the lesson better than the teacher, and pointed it home. "Why are you laughing?" Wenudkor said suddenly. Not to the human, to Holun Vass. Holun Vass had not realized he was. But he was. Quietly, helplessly, in his recording pit, the speaker of records who had filed 11,000 surrenders was making a sound he had never made in 210 cycles, and it was the same sound the humans had made, the warm, helpless sound a person makes when something is genuinely, terribly funny, and they cannot hold it in. "Because they're right," Holun Vass said. "Assessor Prime. They are right. We built the universe's most careful empire, and we forgot to lock the door. 90,000 years. And the joke is, the door we forgot to lock was the same door we walked the 11,000 out of. We taught the whole galaxy that being read is the end. And we never once read ourselves." "That is not funny," said Wenudkor. "It is the funniest thing I have ever heard," said Holun Vass, and he wiped his eyes with the back of a gray hand. "And it is the saddest, and I think those have been the same thing the whole time, and I only just noticed. Open the folders, Assessor Prime, please. I have been counting names for 200 years, and I would like, just once, before I am filed myself, to say some of them out loud." The human channel was quiet. Then Captain Idrin Sale spoke, and the warmth in her voice had gone soft, almost tender, the cheerful edge worn down to something underneath it that had been there all along. "That's the first surrender I've ever respected," she said, "and it's not even yours to give. Assessor Prime, it's your call. Your speaker just told you the truth, and he's the man whose whole job was the truth. So I'd listen to him. But it's your name in the folder. So I'll ask you once, the way you've asked 11,000 worlds, and then I'll stop talking and let you decide. Will you lower your weapons? Will you transmit your registry? Will you acknowledge the reckoning?" 100 counts began. The Empire counted them. The whole barge counted them. Every assessor in every pit. The oldest reflex they had. The count that had ended 40 empires, running now against themselves for the first time in 90,000 years. At 60 counts, Wenudkor had not spoken. At 80 counts, Holun Vass found that he was no longer laughing, that he was instead doing the other thing, the thing that the laughter had been holding back, and that the two had been the same the whole time, just as he'd said. Holun Vass watched the Assessor Prime through those counts, and what he saw he never told anyone, because it was not his to tell, but he kept it, in the worth-remembering folder he would not build for years yet. He saw an old being do arithmetic, not the easy arithmetic, the one ship against 39 frames arithmetic that the captain had said was not difficult, the other kind, the kind no Assessor Prime had ever been asked to do, because no Assessor Prime had ever been on the wrong side of the count before. Wenudkor was weighing the Empire. Holun Vass could see it. He was setting the whole of it on the scales, 90,000 cycles, 11,000 folders, the welcome and the reckoning, and the order it had brought to a galaxy that had been chaos before it. He was weighing all of that against a thing that did not look like much when you set it beside an empire, a small captain's request to say some names out loud, and the terrible mathematics of it, the part that made the old being hesitate to the very edge of the count, was that the empire was so heavy, and the names were so light, and yet the names kept outweighing the empire, every time he ran the sum, because an empire that has to bury the names to stand is an empire that was never as heavy as it told itself it was. At 91 counts, Assessor Prime Wenudkor, ender of 40 empires, signer of the Choir of Ash, reached out across 90,000 years, and lowered the weapons of the patient some. "Open the folders," he said. His voice did not break. He was proud of that. Later, when he had time to be proud of small things. "Open all of them. Begin with the Choir of Ash. I signed that one. I will read those names first. I will read them in front of the whole empire, and I will not stop until the speaker tells me there are no more. And I expect, Holun, that will take a very long time." 200 cycles by my count," said Holun Vass softly, "give or take." "Then we had better start," said Wenud Kor. On the human channel, Captain Idrun Sael let out a long breath, and when she spoke again, the joke was entirely gone, and what was left was just a person, talking to another person, across the wreckage of a thing that had needed wrecking. "Thank you," she said. "I mean that. We rehearsed this 100 ways, and most of them ended with us having to file your barge, and none of us wanted that, whatever it sounded like. You did the hard thing. You did the thing 11,000 worlds never got to do, because you never gave them the choice, and somebody finally gave it to you. I'm going to leave you the ledger now. The whole thing. It's yours again. We're taking our hand off it." "You could have kept it," said Wenud Kor. "You held the writing. By our law, you held everything. Why give it back?" "Because we don't want to be the people who write the universe," said Idrun Sael. "We just wanted to prove that you weren't, either. That nobody is. That the folder closing was never the end of the story. It was just somebody deciding to stop reading. We're going to read now, Assessor Prime. All of us. Out loud. For about 200 years, sounds like. And then maybe the galaxy can figure out a way to exist where nobody gets filed at all." "Wildly optimistic," said Wenud Kor. "Yeah," said the captain, and Holun Vass could hear that she was smiling again, the warmth come all the way back. "We get that a lot. We're a wildly optimistic people. It's our whole thing. You should see the speeches we give right before we do something impossible. They're embarrassing. Come visit sometime, when the reading's done. We'll show you the door you forgot to lock. We kept it. We made it into a little museum. There's a plaque." "What does the plaque say?" asked Wenud Kor, against his will. "It says," said Captain Idrun Sael, "they read everyone but themselves." And on the cataloging barge Patient Sum, in the deepest pit of the most careful empire the galaxy had ever known, 200 assessors heard their oldest law turned gently against them by a single gray ship that had not fired but one shot the whole time, and somewhere in the awful silence after, one of them, then another, then all of them, began helplessly to make the human sound. It carried up the channel. It carried out across the empire. The first thing the Galactic Empire ever heard from a human warship had been laughter. The last thing it heard, before the folders opened, was its own. The reading of the folders did not stay on the Patient Sum. It could not. That was the whole design of it, and Holun Vass understood the design better with every cycle that passed. The empire of the open ledger was, above all else, a network. Every barge spoke to every other barge. Every folder lived in 1,000 copies, so that no fire and no fault could ever lose a single number. The empire had built itself that way on purpose, 90,000 years ago, so that the truth it kept could never be erased. It was the most careful machine for preserving information that had ever existed. And the humans had handed it a truth, and the most careful machine in the galaxy now had no way at all to keep that truth from spreading. When Wenud Kor read the first name of the Choir of Ash aloud, the barge's instruments did what they had always done. They recorded it, they filed it, they copied it to 1,000 other barges, because that was their function. Because a thing said by an assessor prime in a recording pit was Empire record by definition, and Empire record propagated whether anyone willed it or not. The Empire's own perfect, patient, unstoppable system for never losing a single fact carried the confession outward at the speed of light, to every barge, every reader, every kneeling world the open ledger held. You could not stop it. Holun Vass watched 3 junior assessors try, in the first cycle, out of old reflex and new terror. They reached for the propagation locks. There were no propagation locks. There had never been propagation locks, because in 90,000 years, no one had ever wanted to stop the truth from spreading. The Empire had been so sure that knowing was good, that reading was winning, that it had built no door anywhere in the entire machine through which a fact could be kept out. The door it forgot to lock was not one door, it was every door. The whole Empire was one open door, and the humans had simply walked in and started reading the names. By the 10th cycle, the Choir of Ash was being read on 400 barges. By the 100th cycle, the kneeling worlds had begun to answer. This was the part Holun Vass had not foreseen, and the part Captain Idrun Sael, he came to understand, had foreseen completely. The kneeling worlds were not stupid. They had paid the reckoning for 10,000 years, the 9th part of everything forever, and they had paid it because the Empire had taught them that the alternative was no longer exists, and no longer exists meant nothing, an empty word, a closed folder, a thing too small to fear properly because you could not picture it. And now the kneeling worlds were hearing the names. They were hearing what no longer exists actually contained, not nothing, names, children's names, in some of the older folders, because the Empire had been thorough, and thorough meant counting everyone. The kneeling worlds had spent 10,000 years afraid of an empty word, and now they learned the word was not empty. It was full. It was full of the people who had said no, and the fullness changed everything. Because you cannot be ruled by the fear of nothing, once you find out the nothing was always a someone. Holun Vass watched the change come, world by world, and because he was a reader he could not help but read the shape of it, and the shape of it was nothing he had been trained to expect. He had been trained, like every assessor, to fear the rebellion of the strong. That was the whole logic of the reckoning. The whole reason the tithe was set at exactly 1 part in 9, enough to keep every world poorer than the Empire, never so much that a world grew desperate enough to risk everything on a fight. The open ledger had spent 90,000 cycles managing the strong, watching the large worlds, the rich worlds, the ones with shipyards and fleets and proud old houses. Those were the worlds that could hurt you, if they ever stopped being afraid. Those were the folders an assessor kept open on his board. But the rebellion, when it came, did not come from the strong. The strong worlds were the last to move, the most careful, the most invested in the order that had made them comfortable. The rebellion came from the small. It came from the methane worlds and the raft worlds and the singing worlds, the quiet, compliant folders that no assessor had looked at twice in 10,000 cycles. Because they were paid up and silent and posed no threat at all. They had nothing. That was exactly why they moved first. A world with nothing to lose, that has just learned the names of all the worlds with nothing, who came before it, and were called nothing for refusing, is the most unstoppable thing in any empire, because you cannot threaten it with loss. It has already been shown its own grave. It has read its own folder. And a people who have read their own folder are free, in a way the Empire had never thought to be afraid of, because the Empire had never imagined letting anyone read their folder at all. The first kneeling world to stop paying the reckoning was a small one, a methane world at the edge of Sector 4, whose people the Empire's folder described as compliant for 9,000 cycles. They did not declare war. They did not raise a fleet. They simply transmitted, on every channel, A single line, and the line was, "Read us our folder." The Empire did not have a folder for them, because they had knelt, and kneeling worlds were filed under exists. But that was the point. That was the terrible, elegant point the humans had built into the reckoning, without anyone noticing until it was done. The kneeling worlds were demanding to know what would have been written about them if they had said no. They were demanding to read their own unwritten obituaries. And there was no procedure for that, because the Empire had never imagined a world that wanted to look directly at the cost of its own obedience. Within 1,000 cycles, 400 kneeling worlds had stopped paying. Within 10,000 cycles, the reckoning had collapsed. The Empire tried, twice, to close the door it had finally noticed was open. The first attempt came from a barge in Sector 6, an old hard Assessor Prime named Tessun Vale, who had not been on the patient sum, and did not believe a word of what had happened there. He declared the reading a forgery, a human trick written into corrupted folders, and he ordered the names struck from the record, and the propagation halted. It was the correct order, by every old law of the Empire. It was the order Holun Vass himself would have given, 100 cycles before. And it failed completely, because the Empire had built its record machine to be incorruptible, to refuse any order that would delete a confirmed fact. And the names were now confirmed facts, read aloud by an Assessor Prime in a recording pit and copied 1,000-fold. Tessun Vale had spent his whole life serving a machine designed to make exactly his order impossible. The machine did to him what it had done to everyone. It kept the truth, faithfully, forever, whether he willed it or not. He had wanted to be the man who saved the Empire. He became, instead, a small note in the worth remembering folder, the last Assessor Prime who tried to close the door, and the galaxy read his name too, in time, without much anger, the way you read the name of a man who simply did not understand the weather yet. The second attempt was quieter and far more dangerous, and it nearly worked, and Holun Vass thought about it more than any other thing in those long cycles. A faction of the Empire, the careful old houses who had grown rich on the reckoning, proposed not to stop the reading but to take it over, to make the reading official, to appoint speakers, to schedule the names, to build great ceremonies around them, to turn the confession into an institution that the Empire ran, and the Empire owned, and the Empire therefore controlled. It was clever. It was very nearly the cleverest thing anyone in the whole story attempted, because it did not fight the truth. It embraced the truth, and then put a collar on it. An empire that owned its own confession would survive its confession. The reading would go on, and the houses would go on, and in 3 generations, the names would be a ritual instead of a wound, and the empire would have swallowed even its own undoing, and gone on exactly as before. It was Holun Vass who stopped it, and it was the only time in the whole affair that the old speaker raised his voice. He stood in the great hall of the old houses, and he told them the one thing the humans had taught him that they had not said out loud, the thing under all the jokes. He told them that the reading could not be owned, because the entire point of the reading was that the dead could not be owned, and that the moment the empire scheduled the names and built ceremonies around them and appointed speakers to manage them, it would be doing to the reading exactly what it had done to the worlds, taking a living true thing and filing it and calling the filing care. He told them that a confession you control is not a confession. It is a monument, and a monument is just a closed folder you have decided to be proud of, and the empire had enough closed folders. The names did not need a ceremony. They needed only to be true, and said, and unowned. And the old houses, who were not stupid, who were in fact the cleverest beings in the empire, heard the old speaker, and understood that he was right, and that being right, in this one case, meant the end of them, and a great silence fell in the hall. and then one of them, then another, laid down the right to manage the reading, and the door stayed open. The fleet never came. Holun Vass kept waiting for the fire, for the human ships built quietly for 90 years, the loud way Captain Idrun Sael had said she did not want to use. It never came. It never needed to come. The empire of the open ledger had ruled for 90,000 years on a single belief, that the gone were nothing, and the nothing could be safely forgotten, and the humans had not destroyed that belief with weapons. They had destroyed it with reading. They had handed the empire a confession and let the empire's own perfect machine do the rest, and the machine, faithful to the end, had carried the truth to every world the lie had ever bought. Holun Vass thought about that a great deal, in the cycles that followed. He thought about how the humans had won without conquering, how they had taken nothing, owned nothing, occupied nothing. There was no human governor anywhere in the empire. There was no human flag over any world. The last word had not even stayed. She had drifted off into the dark 100 cycles after the folders opened, with a friendly farewell and an open invitation to the museum with the plaque, and the galaxy she left behind was not a human galaxy at all. It was just a galaxy that had stopped being able to lie to itself. That, Holun Vass came to understand, was the deepest joke of all, the one underneath all the captain's lighter ones. The humans had not wanted to rule. They had genuinely, completely not wanted it. They had crossed 40 light years and surrounded a barge and threatened to file an empire, and the entire point of all of it had been to make sure that nobody ruled the way the open ledger had ruled, by deciding who existed. They had come to break the throne, not to sit in it. They had looked at the most careful empire in the galaxy, and the single thing they had wanted from it was for it to stop pretending the dead were nothing. And they had thought that was funny. That was the part Holun Vass kept coming back to, the part he could not file under any heading he had. They had thought it was funny, not cruel, not vengeful, funny. The whole approach, the warmth, the jokes, the museum, the plaque, the cheerful patient teasing of an empire that could have killed the entire human species without noticing, it had all been, somehow, genuinely good-humored. The humans had walked up to the thing the galaxy feared most, and they had laughed at it. Not because they did not understand how dangerous it was, but because they understood exactly how dangerous it was, and had decided, as a people, that the right response to a thing that terrible was to refuse to be afraid of it. He asked one of them about it, much later, when the reading had been going for 30 cycles, and a human envoy had come to help organize the largest recitation of names in galactic history. The envoy was young, younger than the war, born after the door was found. "Why did you laugh?" Holun Vass asked, "when you found our ledger, when you found the open door? Your captain said your whole generation learned our language just to read it and laugh. I have wondered for 30 cycles. We were the most dangerous power in the galaxy. We could have erased your world before you had radios. Why was your first response to laugh?" The young human thought about it. They were a thoughtful people, under the jokes. That was the other thing Holun Vass had learned. Because the alternative was to be afraid, the envoy said finally, and we'd done the math. We knew how big you were, ship for ship. We knew that if we let ourselves be afraid of you, we'd start acting afraid, and afraid people make small choices, careful choices, kneeling choices. We'd have paid your reckoning. We'd have registered. We'd have become a folder marked compliant, like everybody else, and we'd have spent 10,000 years not looking at what was in the other folders, the way everybody else didn't look. So we decided not to be afraid, the envoy said. And the way you decide not to be afraid of a thing is you find what's funny about it. And once we read your ledger, the funny thing was right there, in the open. The biggest, funniest thing in the galaxy. You'd built an empire on the idea that knowing is winning, and you'd never once checked whether anybody could know you back. You forgot to lock the door. It's the oldest joke there is. The careful man who locks every door but his own. And we laughed. And once we laughed, we weren't afraid anymore. And once we weren't afraid, we could see clearly. And once we could see clearly, we knew exactly what to do. "Read you the welcome," said Holun Vass. "Read you the welcome," the envoy agreed, word for word, pointed the other way. It was the only weapon that fit. You can't shoot an empire of knowing. You can't outnumber it. You can't outgun it. You can't besiege it. But you can read it back to itself. You can be the thing it was always afraid of and never believed in. Somebody who read it all the way down. We didn't beat you, Speaker. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. And the captain was always careful about it too. We didn't beat you. We just held up the ledger and let you read your own name in it. You did the rest. You opened the folders yourself. We never wrote a single word." "You wrote one word," said Holun Vass. "Surrounded. You added it to the catalog. I watched you do it." The young human smiled, and it was the captain's smile, the warm one, passed down like an heirloom. "That wasn't a word about you," they said. "That was a word about everyone. Surrounded. It just means somebody can see you. Somebody knows where you are. For 90,000 years, you were the only one who could say that about anybody, and it made you the most dangerous thing alive. We added it to your ledger so it would be true about you too. Not as a threat, as a fact. Somebody can see you now. Somebody knows where you are. You're not the only reader in the room anymore." "And you'd be amazed," the envoy said, "how gentle the whole galaxy gets, the moment everybody can see everybody else. Turns out, most of the cruelty was just people thinking nobody was reading them. Take the dark away, and it's astonishing how few monsters are left. Mostly it's just frightened folks who forgot to lock the door, same as you." Holun Vass filed that. He filed it under a new heading, one he had created himself in the years since the folders opened, a heading the Empire of the Open Ledger had never possessed in 90,000 cycles and badly needed. He filed it under Things Worth Remembering. The folder was small, still. He had only just begun it. But he intended, in the 200 cycles of name reading that lay ahead of him, to fill it as carefully as he had once filled the other kind, the closed kind, the no longer exists kind. And he thought, as he worked, that this might be the truest measure of what the humans had done. They had not changed the Empire's numbers. They had not even changed its methods, not really. The Empire still counted, still filed, still kept its 1,000 careful copies of everything. They had only changed which folder filled up. For 90,000 years, the folder that grew had been the one for the gone. Now the folder that grew was the one for the worth remembering. And a speaker of records who had spent 200 years closing the first kind found, to his quiet astonishment, that opening the second kind felt nothing like surrender. It felt like the start of a very long, very good joke, the kind you tell on yourself, the kind that everyone in the room is allowed to laugh at, finally, including you. The last word came back once. It was 40 cycles after the folders opened, and the reading of the names had become the largest single act the galaxy had ever undertaken. There were worlds now whose entire purpose was the reading. There were children born into it, raised to it, who would grow old reading names and die before the lists ran out, and who considered this not a burden but a privilege, the way a people consider any honest work that needs more years than one life can hold. The Choir of Ash alone had taken 9 cycles to read, and the Choir of Ash had been a small folder, as folders went. Holun Vass was old by then, even by the long measure of his kind. He had given up the recording pit. He spent his cycles among the readers now, a speaker emeritus. an old gray hand that had once closed folders and now helped open them, and there was no one in the Empire who did not know his name, because he had been the first to laugh and the first to weep and the first to ask the Assessor Prime to open the Choir of Ash, and the galaxy had decided, in its slow new way, that this made him worth remembering. When the last word slid out of the dark above the world where the great reading was kept, the whole world stopped to look. She was older, too. You could see it on her hull, the way you can see age on anything that has been working a long time in a hard place. There were new marks on the gray metal, scuffs and scorches that had not been there 40 cycles ago, and Holun Vass understood, looking at them, that the human fleet which had never needed to come to his empire had been needed somewhere, that the galaxy was wide, and the open ledger had not been the only careful empire with an unlocked door, and that the people who refused to be afraid had been busy, in the long dark years, refusing it on a great many other doorsteps. But the ship was whole. He noted that. The old reader's habit, the instinct to measure. The last word had marks on her, but no holes in her. She had been hit, and she had not been broken. In 40 cycles of work across a galaxy of unlocked doors, she had taken everything anyone had thrown at her and come away with scuffs, and Holun Vass found that this did not surprise him at all, because he had learned the human secret, and the human secret was not armor. It was that they did not, at the bottom, believe they could lose, and a thing that does not believe it can lose is a very difficult thing to break. Captain Idrun Sael was old too, when her face appeared on the channel. Older than the war. Gray at the edges, in the way humans went gray, and there were lines around her eyes that Holun Vass recognized, because he had them now too, the lines that come from laughing and weeping at the same thing for a long time. "Speaker," she said, "I heard they let you stop filing." "They let me start," said Holun Vass. "It is better work." "I bet it is." She looked past him, at the world below, at the endless quiet rooms where the names were being read, and something moved across her old face that was not a joke. "How far have you gotten?" 11 of the 11,000, said Holun Vass. "In 40 cycles. We will not finish in my life, Captain. We will not finish in the life of anyone now living. The folders are very deep. You knew that, I think, when you set the reckoning. You knew it would take longer than any of us has." "I knew," said Idrun Sael quietly. "That was the point. A confession you can finish is just an apology. A confession that outlives everyone who made it, that your grandchildren are still reading. That becomes something else. It becomes the thing the Empire is now, not the thing it does. The thing it is. We didn't want you to say sorry, Speaker. We wanted you to become a people who reads the names, forever. So that being that kind of people is just what your children are, and they never even have to decide it, because it was decided before they were born, and they were raised inside it like weather." "You changed our nature," said Holun Vass, "by changing what folder fills up." "We changed your nature," the captain agreed, "by giving you one chance to choose it, and then making the choice take so long that nobody could ever unchoose it. That's the only kind of change that lasts. The fast kind washes out in a generation. The slow kind becomes who you are." She smiled, and the old warmth was still there, undimmed by 40 hard cycles and a galaxy of unlocked doors. "We're a wildly optimistic people, Speaker, but we're patient about it. We took the long view. We learned it from you. We just took it a little further than you did." Holun Vass had thought, over 40 cycles, about what he would say to her if she ever came back. He had composed speeches. He had drafted, in the careful way of a speaker of records, 100 openings, 100 ways to thank her, 100 ways to ask the questions that still kept him awake in the long old nights. In the end, he said none of them. Will you come down, he said instead. To the reading. We have a place kept. We always kept a place. 40 cycles, Captain. There has been an empty chair in the first room, and the readers do not know who it is for, only that it is not to be filled. It is for you. It was always for you. Come down and read a name with us. One name. You never read a single one yourself, in all of this. You said you never wrote a word, and it was true. You never did. You held up the ledger, and let us do all of it. But there is a place kept, and I am old, and I would like, before I am filed, to hear a human read one of our names out loud, in the room where we keep them. The captain was quiet for a long moment. I never read one, she said, because it wasn't mine to read. They weren't our dead, speaker. They were yours. The reading had to be yours, or it didn't mean anything. If we'd come down and read the names with you, it would have been us forgiving you, and we had no standing to forgive you. None of those folders had a human name in them. You never got around to us. The reading had to be the Empire reading its own. That was the whole thing. That was the only thing that could work. I know, said Holun Vass. I have known it for 40 cycles, and I have agreed with it for 40 cycles. And the chair has stayed empty for 40 cycles because of it. And I am asking you anyway, because there is one folder, Captain, one folder in 11,000, that I never told you about, and I think it is time. The captain went still. There is a human folder, said Holun Vass. On the channel, on the bridge of the last word, the old human captain did not move. You found us, she said. Before we found you, you read us first. We read everyone first, said Holun Vass gently. That was our whole nature, Captain, before you changed it. We were the empire of the open ledger. We found your world 90 years before your ship found our barge, when you still thought you were alone in the dark. We read you, we measured you, we opened a folder, and we marked it. In the way we marked all the small new worlds that did not yet have radios, with the heading we used for things we intended to welcome, and then file when they said no. No longer exists, said the captain. You had us in the no longer exists folder, before we ever knew you were there. We had a date for you, said Holun Vass. It is in the folder. The date the welcome was to be sent. The date the reckoning was to be refused. Because we knew you would refuse. We had read you, and we knew. And the date the filing was to be done. It was 90 years ago. It was the year your engineers found our ledger. We were going to file your world, Captain, that year, that exact year, and the only reason we did not is that in the cycle before we sent the ship, your people read the door we forgot to lock, and went quiet, and began to build. And we never knew, because we had already filed you undergoing, and we had stopped reading the folders we had closed. The bridge of the last word was silent. That's the joke, said Captain Idran Sayel slowly, isn't it? That's the one under all the others. We laughed at the open door. We made it a museum. We put a plaque on it. They read everyone but themselves. And the whole time, the door we walked through to save ourselves was the same door you were about to walk us out of. We found the ledger the year you were going to file us. We read our own obituary before you could publish it. We were already in the gone folder, Captain, before we ever knew we were in danger, and the only thing that saved us was that you closed the folder one cycle too early and stopped looking. You stopped reading us, said Idrun Sayel. And that was the one mistake that let us live. The most careful empire in the galaxy, and the one thing it never read carefully enough, was the folder it had already closed. Yes, said Holun Vass. That's the funniest thing I've ever heard, said the captain, and her voice had gone thick, and Holun Vass understood that she was making the human sound, the warm, helpless sound, the one that was laughing and weeping at once, because they had always been the same thing. That's the funniest, saddest, most perfect thing in the entire galaxy, and I'm only hearing it now, 40 years later. You old gray monster. You held that for 40 years. I held it, said Holun Vass, because I did not understand it until now. I have spent 40 cycles reading the names of the gone, and only this cycle, watching your scarred ship come back whole out of the dark, did I understand that you were one of them. You were in the folder. You should have a name in the room. There is a human folder, Captain, and it has exactly one entry, the world we marked to file and never filed, and it is the only folder in 11,000 that we get to read with a living people standing in front of us, instead of only the dead. Come down. Read your own name. You are the one people in the galaxy who gets to read their own obituary out loud in the room where we keep the names, and undo it, by being alive to do the reading. The last word came down. She did not land like a warship. She came down slow and easy over the reading world, 2.9 kilometers of scarred gray metal, lowering itself gentle as a hand over the quiet rooms full of names, and the readers came out to see her, the children born into the reading, and the old ones who had begun it. And they did not cheer, because the reading world had learned that some things are too large for cheering. They were quiet. They were the deep, good quiet of a people who had stopped lying to themselves, and into that quiet the human captain walked, old and gray and scarred as her ship, to the first room, to the empty chair that had waited 40 cycles, and she sat in it. Holun Vass put the human folder in her hands. It was thin. It was the thinnest folder in the ledger. One world, one entry, one date, that had never come true. The captain opened it, and she read, in her own voice. In the room where the Empire kept the names of everyone it had ever decided was nothing, the name of the world that had read the door, before the door could read it. She read it as a name of the living, and when she was done, she did the thing that no one had expected, the thing that became the way the reading was done forever after, in every room, on every world, for all the long centuries it took to finish. She did not close the folder. She turned the page, to the heading, to the old gray word that had meant the end of the story for 90,000 years, and she crossed it out, gently, with the old reader's care, and underneath it she wrote, in the Empire's own hand, in the catalogue that was reality, the only word she had ever added to the ledger besides surrounded. The word was remembered. That's the trick, she said, to Holun Vass, to the room, to the children born into the reading who would carry it forward when the old gray speaker and the old human captain were both themselves names in some kinder folder. That's the whole trick, and it took us 90 years to figure it out, and you 40 more to let us show you. You can't undo the gone. We can't bring back the choir of ash. Nobody can. The folders are real, and the names in them are real, and the dead are really dead, and we never once pretended otherwise. That was the one thing we were always honest about. But you can change which heading the folder lives under. You can take a thing that was filed as gone and file it instead as remembered, and the difference between those two words is the difference between an empire that murders the universe and a people that keeps it. Same names, same folder, same careful empire that never loses a single fact. One word changed at the top. That's all it ever was. That's all it ever takes. You made us laugh, said Holun Vass, to make us see it. We made you laugh, said Captain Idrun Sael, because a frightened people can't see anything. And you were the most frightened people in the galaxy. You were so frightened of the gone that you'd decided to call them nothing rather than look at them. Fear makes you close the folder. Laughter makes you open it. We came in laughing because laughing was the door, speaker. It was the only door into the most careful empire in the galaxy. The one door you forgot to lock. The one you can't lock. Because nobody can lock the door that a good joke opens. We didn't beat you with a fleet. We never needed the fleet. We beat you with the one weapon a careful, frightened, lonely empire has no defense against at all. We thought you were funny, she said, and you were. And you couldn't stop us from finding out. And once we were both laughing at the same thing, the war was already over. It was over before the first shot. It was over the moment your barge heard us laugh and couldn't understand why. Because the not understanding why is where the fear lives. And we'd already walked past the fear and out the other side. The whole empire fell, 90,000 years of it, 11,000 folders of it, because one human ship crossed your border and would not stop laughing, and you could not, for the life of you, figure out the joke. And the joke, speaker, the joke was always you, the careful man who locked every door but his own. We were laughing with you. You just took 40 years to get there. Holun Vass, Speaker Emeritus of the Empire of the Open Ledger, who had filed 11,000 surrenders and opened 11 of 11,000 folders, and would die long before the reading was done, looked at the old human captain in the chair that had waited 40 cycles, and he found that he was, at last, all the way through to the other side of it, past the fear, past the grief, into the warm, helpless place, where the laughing and the weeping were the same thing, and always had been. There was one folder he had been saving, and he gave it to her then, because the moment was right, and there might not be another. It was the river world. The singing people of Sector 2, the rafts, the names in the last song, the first folder he had ever closed with his own young hand. He had carried it to the reading world himself, 40 cycles ago, and he had asked that it be kept aside, unread, until he could be sure it would be read right, and he had never been sure, until now, with the human captain in the chair, and the ship down, and the rooms quiet. This one is mine, he told her. Not the Empire's, mine. The first I ever closed. I was young, and I felt nothing, and I wrote the word across a people who were made entirely of music, because they would not sell us a ninth of a song. I have carried it 40 cycles. I cannot read it. I have tried, in the night, alone, and the names will not come out of me, because I am the one who buried them, and a thing cannot dig its own grave back open. But it can be helped. Will you help me, Captain? Will you read the river world with me? You take the names and I will sing the song underneath, the way they did, the last time, so that whoever hears it last will know who they were. And the old human captain, who had never read a single name in all of this, because none of them had been hers to read, took the Riverworld folder from the old gray speaker's hands, because this one he was giving her, this one he was asking her into, and that made it different, that made it aloud. She opened it. She read the names, slowly, in her own voice, and underneath the names, Holun Vass sang the last song of the raft people of Sector 2, the song he had transcribed 80 cycles ago and filed under closed and never played, and it turned out he had known it by heart the whole time, every note of it, waiting, the way the dead wait in a closed folder for someone to open it. When the song was done, there was no folder left that said no longer exists over the river world. There was a folder that said remembered, in the captain's hand, and under it, in the speaker's, the whole of the last song, written out fresh, so that it would never again be a thing that only one old being carried alone in the dark. Read me another, he said, when he could speak. While you are here, while the ship is down, and the rooms are quiet, and we are both old. Read me another name, Captain. The Empire never loses a single fact. We have 11,000 folders and 100 million names, and 200 cycles of reading ahead of us, and I will not hear the end of it, and neither will you, and our children's children will still be reading when the last star in this sector goes cold." "Good," said Captain Idrin Sale, and she turned to the next folder, and she smiled the warm old smile, the one passed down like an heirloom across 90 years and 40 cycles and a galaxy of unlocked doors. "Let's get started then. We've got all the time there is. We're a patient people." And the first sound the Galactic Empire ever heard from a human warship had been laughter. And the last sound it ever made as an empire of the gone had been laughter too. And in between, for as long as there were rooms and names and quiet, patient people to read them, there was only the slow good work of remembering, which is the one war humanity has never lost, and the only one it ever cared to win. Holun Vast died in the 410th cycle of his service, 60 cycles after the folders opened, with the reading not even 100th done. He died among the readers, in the first room, in a chair beside the one that had once waited 40 cycles for a human captain, and now waited for no one, because the captain too was gone by then, an old ship laid up at last in a quiet orbit above the world she had never conquered. He died, the records say, with a folder open in his hands, partway through a name, and the reader beside him simply took up where his voice had stopped, and the name was finished, and the reading went on, the way it was built to, the way it would for 200 cycles more, because the empire of the open ledger never lost a single fact, and a death was just a fact, and the work did not stop for it. They put his name in the worth remembering folder. It was the folder he had built himself, the new kind, the one that filled up now instead of the old kind, and his was not the first name in it, but it was the one the children learned earliest, after the river world and before the choir of ash. Holun Vass, speaker of records, who filed 11,000 surrenders and then could not stop laughing, and so opened every folder he had ever closed, and taught a galaxy to do the same. There was no ceremony. He had forbidden ceremonies. There was only the name, said once, true and unowned, and then the next name, and the next. The slow good work going on forever, which was the only monument he had ever wanted, and the only one the humans had ever built for anyone. The door is still a museum. The plaque is still there. It still says, "They read everyone but themselves." And below it, 40 cycles later, in a steady gray hand, someone added a second line, and the second line is the one the children read first, the one they learn before they learn the names, the one that is the whole of what the human ship came 90 years and 40 light years to teach the most careful empire that ever lived. It says, "So we read ourselves," and laughed, and opened every door we had.